Chapter 17. Rite of Passage. It was hours before dawn when the rain seemed to die down, and Palson finally opened his eyes, accepting the fact that he would forego sleep that night. He sat up and listened to the light pattering on his tent, and stared absently into nothing. Every time he closed his eyes of late, he could see his home and his village far away in the Esterlands. He could hear the deep rolling waves of the Fourth Sea down the old road at the borders of town, feel the sand in between his toes and hear the children laughing in the distance. He stood up from his fur blankets and paced back and forth slowly in only his sleeping breeches, ignoring the cold of the night on his bare chest. He wasn't used to a tent this spacious, but then again everything was new and unfamiliar since he had watched Verfold die before his eyes. He had never had many personal belongings, let alone brought them on the campaign west to conquer Tritus, and the tent seemed emptier than ever. At one end sat the thick bed covers that rolled out atop a short wooden frame next to his armor stand and sword leaning against it. The only other items were a small chair and table for writing, as if he had anyone to write to, and a small chest in the corner with his personal belongings. Without realizing it, he was kneeling down to unlock the latches that held the thick wooden lid closed. He pushed through a bound book with some of his personal writings and some extra articles of clothing until he found what he was looking for, a small glass box covered with ornate designs and gemstones of all colors that looked out of place amidst the bland contents of the chest. He felt the weight of the box in his hands, and ran his fingers across the grooves and cuts in its workings as he had done so many times before. At last he moved the metal hook locking the top and lifted the lid. Setting the box on the ground, he took out the first of the trinkets inside, a small figurine of a man carved from dark wood. Half of the figure was charred black and an arm was missing, but it was whole enough for him. He gently placed the man on the ground and removed the next article. It was a shred of cloth, old and dirty and fraying at the edges. He held it gently like a wounded bird. It was a fabric of drab color, it too blackened at the corners but to him as vibrant as the richest tapestry. He next brought out a tiny leather pouch with a drawstring and dumped the contents into his palm. Plum pits emerged, 12 in all, and he counted them carefully like always, one by one before replacing them to the pouch, tightening the string and putting it aside with the other things. After came the rest of the glass box's contents, a smooth wooden ball, a soiled rolled-up piece of paper, a pearl necklace, and lastly a fine wooden horse carved of wood and painted white. After he examined each of them several times, he lined them all up on the ground and stared at the meager collection as a whole. They were the only things left in the world that meant anything to him at all. When he could look no longer, he carefully returned them to the glass box and replaced it to the wooden chest. His thoughts stewed with anger all the while, like they always did when he looked at his possessions, and without thinking he made his way across the tent and drew his sword from the sheath by the armor stand. He clenched it tightly and closing his eyes breathed heavily, deeply until he felt control return to his wrists, then began running through the forms he had been taught so long ago. They were ancient techniques that possibly only he and his master knew, the famed vagabond Vasero. They had saved Palson's life more than once, and one day he would use them to claim his revenge. He stood tall and straight, as his body glided seamlessly through a sequence of perfect cuts and parries as if he were swimming through the air, dispatching foes. That shadow walker. She could be halfway to the crushed isles by now. I'll follow her, and the rest of her filthy race right through the uncharted waste if I have to. His feet shifted into the next form and his thoughts followed. Here I am serving under Marmius, and for what? So far he and his queen's promises have brought nothing but trouble. Since we began, there have been no advances toward the Shadow Walkers. I care nothing for this foolish nation and their ambitions. For all I know, they stirred all of the Shadow Walkers from their holes in the first place. He switched to a more aggressive form and cut an imaginary opponent's arms left, right, then fell to one knee and cut the legs left, right. After he had expended his restless energy, sleep began to invade him again, and he returned his sword to its spot next to the armor stand. He forced himself to sit back down on his furs and arrange his thoughts. He had not had a place to call home for many years, yet now he felt more lost than ever. No matter how hard he tried to trace his decisions back to see where he went wrong, to see which move made him a general of Talgarth, his search was vain. 10 years ago I would have laughed at the notion. He chuckled. 10 years prior he was far from Avondale. Well, for now, Here I am, and there is no stopping tomorrow from coming." He looked at the table across the tent room, at the rolled-up parchment that lay there. It was a wide vellum paper of high quality, only the best for the hand of Lord Marmion, second in command. He knew, come morning, that he would have to follow orders and bring the cursed document across the border into Manon. He shuddered at the thought that he would have to head such a proposition. The sun rose, and no matter how hard he tried to delay the deed, it was not long before he was riding at the head of 400 men with Mayor Zuck by his side, followed by just as many gruels. Banners finely stitched with the crest of the crimson sun flapped in the wind. His column marched dutifully, but their looks betrayed their true feelings. No matter what the cause, it was never pleasant to march shoulder to shoulder with gruels. Palson and Mayor Zuck, the only ones on horseback, were the first to come over the high grassy ridge marking the end of Avondale, and look down into the kingdom of Manon rolled out before them like an honorary carpet. Much of the terrain was the same, with tall green grass covering rolling hills, but a few miles in the land was spotted with marshes and small lakes. Far ahead in the distance, he could see the Titan Mountains slope downward until they disappeared into flat marshlands. Below was the port city of Shorewell, their destination and potentially the stage for their next battle. He couldn't take in the details for too long before his attention was drawn to the column of men riding up the incline towards them, white flags raised high above their steeds. He had expected them, but Palson shook his head all the same at actually seeing the sight. These people want no trouble. If they are wise, they will comply with the terms and nobody has to die. If luck is with them, the Queen will come with her ships and take us back, and we will never have to come back to this cursed land again. The vile croaking of Mayor Zuck's voice beside him interrupted his thoughts. If it were my choice, we would gut the whole lot of them right here and now. Puny humans. This miserable city has no chance against us, even after our long march, he spat. Palson's blood began to boil even as his companion spoke. Puny humans. You are a half-blood yourself, for fate's sake. I would sooner kill you. His hand slid closer to the hilt of his sword. Just for a moment he had to fend off the desire to remove Mayor Zuck's head and end his diatribes once and for all, but thoughts of the punishment that may befall him if he were to murder one of the key generals held him back. If Marmion heard, he could end up like Verfold, rotting in the woods somewhere north. Palson tried to find something to say to silence Mayor Zuck, something that would effectively put him in his place, but in his frustration lost the drive to do so and said nothing. The beast probably thinks I'm a coward. Damn him. His chance to mend the situation passed as the riders of Shorewell slowed to a trot and halted 100 paces from them. Palson frowned and mentally noted that Mayor Zuck was right in one regard: they were a miserable lot. He guessed that their party was close to 200 strong, with about 40 of them mounted and fitted with spears, a very good advantage on their part to be sure, but still no match for his men, coupled with the chaotic brutality of 400 bloodthirsty gruels. They all wore heavy armor similar to that of the men of Tritus and carried swords, but no shields. At their head was an older bald man with a thick white moustache. It was he who halted his company and rode forward carrying a white flag on his shoulder. 2 others rode next to him carrying loaded crossbows. Palson and Mayor Zuck left their men behind and made their way down the ridge to meet them. The bald man spoke before they had completely halted. I am Julam, commander of His Highness troops in Shorewell. Just last night we had word of your business in Avondale, and now I presume you wish to move into Manon as well. He held his head high and his voice was filled with confidence and years of experience. I warn you, he went on, that what you see before you is but a portion of the men stationed here. Although we are in good standing with Avondale, we protect our borders well, and I have many troops at my call. Palson saw Mayor Zuck's lips snarl up, and the bloodlust was almost visible behind his retinas. He didn't give him a chance to spit out some foul insults and ruin their cause. Palson quickly brought out the parchment from his coat and hastily untied the cord binding it closed. Julam of Manon, he said in a loud voice. I am Palson Materel II, General of Talgarth. His voice was void of feeling, as if he were already reading from the parchment. Why did I have to deliver the message? This will not bring me the head of a shadow walker. He went on. Lord Marmion, second in command to Queen Tamara, is in our company, and we have soldiers enough to crush and sack this city before the sun sets, well before you can call in your troops from their posts along the borders." The men with the crossbows glared at the two of them, their fingers itching at the triggers. Gulam did not so much as blink. Somewhere inside, Palsson felt his confidence drop, but he brought the document up and took his cues from it, doing his best to keep his voice from wavering. He could feel Mayor Zuck's dirty eyes on him. "We have fought in Avondale, as you said. And we wish to enter Manon under a strict treaty of peace. We wish to take refuge in your city, and wait there until we receive further orders from Talgarth." Gulam chuckled. "You think I'm a fool, don't you, lad?" he smirked, leaning on the front of his saddle. "You and your vermin can't just walk in and take Shorewell. You could charge right this instant and all of us might die, but it would be a worthy price to pay to keep Talgarth from defiling Manon soil. If the city were taken, the capital would march against you." "Indeed," Palsson answered quickly, again reminding the half-gruel brewing next to him who had been commissioned to deliver the message. "But I hope, good sir, that the capital would be able to provide sufficient means to bring a siege here." He straightened and held the parchment high as he recited his next words. "In no more than 2 days, there will be ships arriving at your ports here in Shorewell, one bearing the lioness Queen Tamara herself. If you wish war upon your country, then war will bring with it all of the might of Talgarth. I can personally guarantee overwhelming bloodshed, and the unnecessary deaths of innocents all the way to the borders of Faldesia." Gulam cursed under his breath and his advisers went pale. Palsson continued. "We are weary from our march and only wish to remain here until the Queen arrives and gives us further instructions. We swear with an oath that until that time we will harm no one and cause no damage to your cities, citizens or your country." "What is the value of an oath from Talgarth?" Gulam sneered and spat. "You wish to reject our terms," Palsson said coolly. "If you know what is good for you, you'll accept them, you old fool. Nobody has to die here. Avondale was enough. And what if when your queen arrives, she decides our total annihilation is in order? What then?" Gulam said between clenched teeth. Palsson rolled the document back up and threw it to Gulam. "I know no more. But I hope for your sake she has other plans."
Thank you for listening. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Episodes go live every Monday and Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The audiobook can be purchased in its entirety on Google Play Books. Get the whole trilogy now in both paperback and ebook formats. All links are in the description.